Good morning and welcome to News with a View, hosted by me, Johnny Costa. I apologize. Two shows going out today. Yesterday's show did not go out due to a technical issue right here. So I put that out today. Today is February 2nd, 2026. This would be episode 22. Going unscripted today because we're going to make it a quick one. It's Monday, and I got a lot of catching up to do on things. I was going to do a show on my prediction for 2026, but some of the people that I had put into a spreadsheet and came up with a algorithm for the Senate got skewed because some of those people are on the fence on running again. So, and Republicans and Democrats. The House of Representatives is a little bit more complex because of redistricting and that's a little bit harder to predict. Senate races are pretty easy to predict. And of course, as you get deeper into it, you put different variables in there and start changing it. I will say that for the last 6 or 5 presidential elections, the database that I created years ago is as accurate as ever, except for 2020. And we all know why. Well, actually, I'll take that back. Bill Clinton winning was the first time that my program didn't work, that I was wrong. The algorithm and the data I was putting in there, which is the data I always use. So, but that will be a little bit later on during the week. Today, I'm going to go a little bit off topic. I'm going to talk about a bill in Washington State, and this is a state bill, and it's HB 2321. Now, a lot of states are doing the same thing that Washington State is doing. And what that is, it's really ownership rights of repair and use. What HB 2321, and it's not to be confused in Washington State, there's another HB 2321 about housing. It has nothing to do with housing. This is about creative control of a 3D printer that you buy. So what Washington State and a lot of other states, it's just not Washington State, excuse me, it's New York trying to do it, and Arizona and some other states, California. What they want, or what they're proposing, is that the manufacturers of these 3D printers put a lockout program on their devices that prohibit people from building parts, let's say for a gun. So that this is about chasing ghost guns. And what you have to do is that when you submit a piece of software to manufacture something or to create something, the 3D printer would have to access the internet and go into that state's database and somehow look at the program or look at what you're doing to say whether or not that violates HB 2321. So what it really does is stops the owner of that printer from going in to the operating system and enhancing it, or saying, I want it to do this now, or I want to change, the creativeness of how the head sprays, or how the thing grinds, or how the CNC machine does its functions. That would be blocked. And you could only build things that the state would have to approve. Now, I don't know how they plan on doing it and what their database is, or how they know that what you're building is going to be part of a gun. But the language in it goes beyond just a printer and CNC machine. It just states machine, or any machine. A computer can be considered a machine. Your car could be considered a machine. Now they're saying, no, this is all going to mean this. But that's not what the words say. And what this comes down to, if I'm using it for art, I won't be able to change anything. I can't become creative, because everything has to go through the state to be approved before I can do it. So what they're doing is saying that you can't sell, transfer, or receive a CNC machine or a 3D printer in the state of Washington unless it has been locked out by the manufacturer. So you would be unable to change parameters inside the operating system, or take their operating system off and put your own operating system in. Open source, program. You wouldn't be able to do that. You would be locked in, and that's it. And the state would have full control over whether or not you could build a piece or not. This will face a huge hurdle, but this is the beginning. And there's been other legislation in there, where they go, we're doing this for the protection. We don't want ghost guns. We don't want, you people to be able to make these weapons. And the fact of the matter is that you will always be able to make a gun. You could do it. You could always do something illegal. There's no mechanism in place to 100% prevent you from doing something illegal. Now, there's consequences for doing things illegal, but HB 2321 really goes beyond it, because it's taking away the freedom of expression. And that really collides with the ability for innovation, for you to take something and you go, yeah, here's a pencil, but if I designed it where there was a little curve in here and it held differently kids might be able to hold a pencil better and have better writing ability. Well, you'll have people say, well, no, the state's not going to stop you from doing that. But before you can do it, you have to you have to go into the state, and then we'll tell you whether or not you could do it. Yeah, you don't like the government getting too deep involved, and then there are good reasons, and I get the idea that you want to stop the ghost gun production. But the minute you go down this road, it's like telling an artist, you can't paint this. So when you buy your brush, you have to tell us what you're going to paint. And if you don't use that brush for what you're saying you're using it for, you're in violation. And before that store could sell it to you, there has to be some mechanism in place for us to know you even wanted to buy it, and it's regulated. I know that's an extreme, but this is how this stuff happens. This is how a snowball at the top of a mountain turns into an avalanche. Laws like that inhibit creativity and innovation puts a crimp, mostly as we're going now high speed into 3D printing. I'm amazed at it. Absolutely amazed at what can be done with a 3D printer today and these CNC machines, and what they can do with the accuracy. It's like Star Trek with a replicator. No one said that could happen, and that's exactly what a 3D machine is. It's a replicator. We just haven't gotten to the point yet where it creates food or water. But you could take it and build stuff. That's for certain. And depending on how big of a machine you have, is the only limit on building stuff. It's a dangerous path. And I could see people going, well, I'm never going to build a gun, so, I'm not too concerned with it. But once they have the software to inhibit you, they can just shut your machine off. And your machine can't build something unless it goes through their platform. So if their platform goes down or something happens to the internet, that $300,000 machine over there is a paperweight. There are too many problems in this. I do not believe HB 2321 will pass in its current language. There's a great YouTube channel, Loyal one word, Moses, the other word. And I'm pretty sure it's Loyal Moses, and he's on YouTube. And he goes into this much more creatively and more elegantly than I am doing it. But I'm constantly on YouTube to the point where, it's becoming a problem in my marriage. But I go for these type of things. I look to see what's going on elsewhere in the United States, in local government, and the federal. Because whatever happening over there will definitely roll down to other states. And this is a real tricky one because their language in there is very loosey-goosey. And it can be then taken steps that it was never meant to be. But since it didn't mention it and it said machine, well, and how now we're having everything interconnected. Do you really want the state or the federal government to go into your computer and look at stuff? How do I know what they're looking at? How do I know what data they're collecting? Now, when I go on the internet, I'm assuming the government is looking at everything I'm doing. That's just a fact. I have no expectation of privacy when I go out onto the internet. But I do have an expectation of privacy when I'm typing a letter or writing a script for my show. That's not going anywhere but me. And under this languages, that might not be the case in the future. So it's a free speech issue. It's a First Amendment issue. And I think it violates your First Amendment. And I understand. I don't like the idea of anyone being able to build a gun. But the reality is, I can go to Home Depot, buy a piece of stock iron, put it in my home lathe, use a barrel drill, fabricate by hand the internal mechanisms to make a gun. And there's no serial number, there's nothing on it. I can do that. I possess the knowledge to do that. So if I went to Home Depot and bought a 12-inch piece of metal that I now make into a barrel, do they have to report me? It just goes way beyond the machine being able to do it. They want to use the machine and manufacture it. So there can be liability on the manufacturer side. That's exactly what this is about. This is being able to sue the makers of a 3D printer for someone who does make a gun illegally and shoots someone, or uses it in crime, or just makes it to go, wow, bang on a ring, wow, that thing worked. Amazing. Well, now that person's a criminal. And it turns ordinary, law-abiding citizens into criminals. And it amazes me in a state like Washington State that screams and cries, democracy, democracy. You know, we're going to lose our democracy. Everything's bad is going to happen because of this guy. And they're going in there and they're going, well, we're taking your Second Amendment right away from you. For the good of everyone. And again, they're now limiting that through the First Amendment, which, you know, this is a freedom of expression. This is going to stifle creativity, or could. Innovation. Not a good idea. To learn more about this, it is a censorship. It is a censorship issue. Loyal Moses, LOYAL MOSES, on YouTube. Look him up. See what he's showing you, and see if you get to the same conclusion. Because that's in Washington State, but I guarantee you it will be in New York, it will be in New Jersey, it will be in Virginia, it will be in Maine, it will be in Connecticut, it will be in Massachusetts. They will just look at this and go, hey, that's something I could put my name on and push it through. And I'm the sponsor of that, and look what I've done. And I did it to stop ghost guns, but it goes way beyond 3D printers. And it will stop manufacturers from selling in particular states. We can't ship it there because we're not going to do that. So then what happens is these states are going to petition the federal government to say, well, we want to be able to stop this from being mailed to a third party who then mails it into our state. This has huge, huge problems and ramifications for people. So take a look at that. Washington State, HB 2321. Go to Loyal Moses on YouTube and take a look for yourself. All right. That was almost 20 minutes of my dribble on that. The other thing I'm going to discuss today, Epstein. Do the Democrats really think that the Epstein file releases are going to amount to anything in the election? Because that's what they're hoping for. And in all honesty, except for new names coming out on there, and there's 4 million documents or something that just got released, and now the lawyers for 200 of the alleged victims are screaming, stop, no more, because stuff isn't being redacted properly. Some of the people the government had no idea were victims. There were some people on there that never came forward and said, I'm a victim, yet their name appears in it. And even as a minor, their names appear because there's nothing there to say how old they are. It's just information. So there's no way for this to be 100% compliant as these defense lawyers would like. They wanted this out in a month, and they redacted what they, were trying to do. And I think I read somewhere that it was a 0.001% of the material that was released was not released. Not that it wasn't released properly, but it wasn't released being redacted. And redacted just means blacked out. So the lawyers are now screaming, no, no, don't send anything more out because we don't know what that is. Well, that is a major problem for the defense lawyers, for the people going after, the estate and other people. And this is a civil matter. Though, of course, a civil matter can't turn criminal in the light of new information, just so you know well, it's civil, who cares? Well, but it could turn criminal. So, the idea of releasing this information was to make the defense have more material to go after. And this is all about money at this point. The justice has nothing to do with it. Justice has nothing to do with it. If it was really about justice, people would say, Epstein hung himself, he killed himself. Poetic justice. And that's it. This is about the hundreds of millions of dollars that is still out there in Epstein world. And the billions of dollars floating around with people that might have visited the island or had interactions with some of these women. A lot of these people do not want to go to court with this because it opens other doors. And you don't, no one liked, and honestly no one liked, when prosecutors, special prosecutors looked in the window of Bill Clinton because they didn't find anything over here, so now we're going to ask him about what he did over there, but that had nothing to do with what was going on with Whitewater. And no one is a bigger Republican than me. And even then I said, yeah, that's wrong. That's wrong. That was not about Whitewater. This is about, now you're asking him, what did you have for breakfast today or something? It had nothing to do. One had nothing to do with the other. But that's going off page here a little bit. What's going on with the victims is they're looking for money. And that's okay. You want to go there, and some of these people were adults going to this island and doing what they were doing as an adult. And allegedly there were some minors there that were not allowed to make adult decisions about themselves. And the case will hinge upon, in those particular cases, which are real serious, did the other party know that these were underage girls? Because if they didn't, they could assume, hey, they flew in here, it was flown in here, I'm going to assume that they're adults. They look like adults, might be young adults, 18 years old. But I've seen a lot of 15-year-old girls that could pass for 22 years old. And I've seen a lot of 22-year-olds that could pass as a 15-year-old. So unless you went up there and go, hi, my name's John, can I see 2 forms of ID with birth dates on there? I mean, well, you don't, because it's not expected. Unless they could prove that some of these people went to Jeffrey Epstein and said, make sure no one's over 18 years of age. then have at it. Have at it. A lot of these people, it's buyer's regret. A lot of the victims are buyer's regret. They had been gone there more than once. And if you had a bad experience someplace the first time, would you go back thinking that this is going to be a better experience the second time? And even if you did, even if you said, well, all right, maybe the first time I didn't quite get what was going on and stuff, but it wasn't horrible. It just wasn't what I was geared up for at that moment in time. But as I'm a little older, I'm a little this, I'm a little that. Yeah, all right. Let me see if the second time. And, some of these people went for years. When I say people, I meant alleged victims. And some not. And now, you got to sort out the truth. And in a civil case, you don't have to sort out the truth that much. You don't need to use a reasonable doubt, or, a reasonable person could say that's thrown out. So, if they think they're going to implicate Trump or any of his people, this stuff was already out there. This is all stuff the prior administrations had in their hand. And if they thought there was anything bad going on, they would have looked at it. And it's easy enough. As much as, people say there's 4 million documents, they have high-speed scanners that convert them into PDFs, and then you just start searching names. Any of these people come up, give me a list. Now I could trace it back to what page number of the things you put in. We have that technology. The FBI has that technology. The Department of Justice certainly has that technology. 4 million documents would take a long time to scan, but they have the resources to do that. And I'm sure the resources were done way before the Trump administration. So, was it able to be done? Yes. You think it would be done. I mean, that's just me thinking. Maybe these people are just so, yeah. I got a house full of documents here. Where do we start? Where do we end? The case that was used against Maxwell, I'm going to assume that all the evidence and all the pertinent documents were given to the defense from the prosecution during discovery. Now, if they were not, and the government knew they had more documents, well, that's a reason to have a mistrial. And if the government contends that, hey, the first 3 documents proved she was guilty, that was enough proof for us to prove that she was guilty, and they just stopped at that point, and those were the documents they handed over to the defense. Whereas maybe if they went back 500 pages, they would have found information that might have been contrary to the information that they received, and that opened up the possibility of, saying information's not right. This document says this, but yet these people say that. Again, you don't know what you don't know. So if the prosecution knowingly or did not know that there was more evidence out there, then the defense gets to go to the court and go, hey, we want to look at it all, and we are now asking for, you to dismiss the charges or to stay the charge, whatever they do. And of course, they won't do it. They'll say, well, at best, we'll grant you a new trial. But, as of right now, she's convicted. Unless the evidence was so, where the prosecution said, yeah, no, they don't need that. No, they don't need that. No, they don't need that. Then, that's a whole different story. But again, we don't know. All we know is that there has been another 4 million documents that went out the door. And now, again, the legal team is in chaos. And they're demanding that the Justice Department stop. They're going to New York federal judges to say, make it stop. And again, this is stuff that they were screaming, release, 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 and now it's released. And they're like, no, we don't want it released. They want to cherry pick it, which is their right to do on the defense side. The prosecution, the state, really can't cherry pick what they want to give them. They might be able to say, hey, this document didn't mention anyone on your list. This is not germane to your case, or it can't even get back there. This is a document showing the roof was repaired. Or, this was the landscaping bill, so it's not germane to your case. So, yeah, we're not going to send it to you. And you don't know. And that's the way, lawyers, go figure. So, I don't think that this is going to change anyone's mind on Epstein and their political views. It's not going to make a Democrat vote Republican. It's not going to make a Republican vote Democrat that haven't done that already. Just not going to do it. What this does do is it's just more noise. And this is what they like doing, is making noise for a president that distracts them from what they needed to do. Trump is very good at just canceling that noise out. So I'm not too concerned. There's nothing in there that, like I said, if there was anything in there against Trump, or really the people that he has picked, I think that would have been out at the Senate hearings with these people. And if I was a Democratic senator and there was information that I could have used and the government sat on it, or the Department of Justice sat on it, I might get upset with that. Since Maxwell was already convicted, Epstein was dead. You couldn't do anything more than that. And the other cases are just civil cases. If I was a Democrat and I found out that this information was being held from me, or held back to a Republican that said this information would have changed my mind on someone, yeah, I'd be upset. I'd be upset. there is where it would, to me, make a political difference. Because then who knew not to release it, and how far up the chain did it get? You know, they said, we're going to keep the president out of this because it's not presidential. But, you know, the DOJ, there would have been people there that would have leaked that information at the time of the hearing, because it was just too new and there were still people in place that had access to information that were not Trump friendly. So I don't think there's anything out there too much that hurts politically. Business leaders, yep. Donors to both sides, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, there's no one that's rich and powerful that's not on that list. You're not going to find the baker down the street that went to his island because he wasn't interested in that. Epstein wasn't interested in that type of person. Epstein was a procurer. He gathered information and then would sell that information or use that information or get paid for that information by putting people together. He was a procurer. And he knew how to throw a party. And he had a private island where he could have been in there with a little person who went, the plane. So, because that was Fantasy Island. And, you know, I'm really upset I was never invited there. So if I'm going to be mad at Epstein, it's going to be about that. He could at least go in through a phone book and went, stopped at a name and go, contact that guy. Why not? All right. This has been 43 minutes. I was only going to make this a 25, 30-minute show, and 13 minutes over my thing, which is, like at work, I was always about 13, 14 minutes late. All right. Everyone be safe. Give to a charity if you can. Give to a food bank if you can. Food is always wonderful to give. Money is really essential to a food bank because they can use that money directly as they need it in that point in time. Say a prayer. Prayer does work, regardless of what a Democrat, not Bob in New York, I think Bob believes in prayer, but say a prayer. If anything, it can't hurt. And with that, I am going to say thank you. Everything looks like it recorded today. Hopefully, this goes out in about an hour because I'm not doing any editing other than saying who I am and pedigreed information and just little list of what I'm screaming about today. All right, everyone. Take care as I fade to black.